Okay. So the topic we're going to cover today is accepting what we got, not what we wanted. Now, I, at university, used to have this habit. I used to buy whole bags of these chappies. I don't know if you remember these chappies with those fun facts inside. I remember my roommates always used to mock me because I had this bag of chappies next to me when I was studying. And they had these little, absolutely pieces of useless information, but it was fun nonetheless. So in one of them, I found that it said, frogs swallow with their eyes closed. Now, my immediate thought was, who did this research? Who watched a frog while they were swallowing and thought, wow, this is really empirically significant. We need to document this. Frogs swallow with their eyes closed. Now, in preparation for today, I actually thought about that, and I said, it's actually such a powerful metaphor for mindfulness, because we have found a way, and I include myself in that, and us as healthcare professionals find a way to hide behind busyness, to hide behind possibly seeing more clients, studying something else, working longer hours, going to gym earlier. We find a way to cope, and those are all, most of those things are really functional for us. But moments like this, where there's a moment of crisis, kind of drags us into the now, where a lot of what's happening around us, we swallow with our eyes closed. We take in the world around us, but we don't really absorb the world around us. And what happens in a crisis like this is we really get dragged into the here and now, and we've got no choice but to observe. We've got no choice but to open our eyes and to say, well, what is happening? Especially considering the fact that most of us are on the front lines. We are dealing with individuals with high levels of anxiety. We are dealing with individuals, possibly if you're here today, we've got doctors joining us, we've got a whole multidisciplinary team basically joining us here today. If you're on any one of those teams, you will know that we're on the front line of this. And we actually don't get to swallow with our eyes closed anymore. We're opening up our eyes and we're saying, okay, how do we actually deal with this crisis ourselves first? And then we go over into helping other people. And it presents us with a choice. We can either protest or we can accept reality. We can respond willful or we can respond willingly. So the first exercise I'd like to do this morning is a mindfulness exercise, but it's also a reality acceptance exercise. It's observing your thoughts and emotions. So what I'd like you to do is I'd like you to take 30 seconds, have a look at those stats, and then I'd like you to share in the chat column, just in a non-judgmental way, what are your thoughts and emotions that come up. If you are this morning in a space where you don't want to share, that's okay. I'd like you just to take a moment. If you've got a piece of paper next to you and you want to write down, instead of sharing on the chat column, that's perfectly fine. The chat column is anonymous. We see it, but obviously we're not going to disclose what you're saying. But the exercise to observe your thoughts and emotions. Pretend like you're a diver at the bottom of your ocean and your thoughts are just little boats coming by and you're just looking at what it's actually saying. I'm going to give you guys 30 seconds just to share a little bit about what are the thoughts and emotions that come up for you. Okay, thank you so much, everybody that shared. I mean, I can see there's a lot of people anxious, scared for my doctors. Observing thoughts, observing emotions. Very, very important exercise. Heart beating faster. Urge to do something else. Maybe go look at my phone rather. I notice I want to avoid it. Okay. Then obviously the next picture would be this one. Lockdown extended ministers to donate 33% of their salaries to help COVID-19 fight. So once again, last night, if you're anything like me, I mean, I've got two beautiful children. But last night there was a moment when my wife and I realized that there's another 3 weeks of the lockdown. And that obviously has a lot of implications for a lot of moms and dads and families. And if you don't have children, it has an implication for you and your partner. I found that people during this time, they either get the relationship become a lot closer, or they become a lot more distant. So I think what we're sitting with as healthcare professionals, and what dialectical behavior therapy allows for, is this dialectical reality. And it's a very important concept to start off with, because it's balancing acceptance and change. So on the one side, where it is what we can change in any situation, when working with a client, when working with a patient, when working with whoever you're working with in life, there's this dialectic that's happening the whole time. On the one side is what is it that I can change about the situation, but the other side of the dialectic is what do I need to accept about the situation? Because if I can't change it, and I keep holding on to the idea that I can, I'm holding on to the illusion of control. The flip side to that would be I'm lacking acceptance, which means I'm actually making myself miserable. But then there's, as I'm going to discuss a little bit later as well, there's another component where they say sometimes individuals hand over control of their lives, where they've got the ability to change and they've accepted things that they should have actually been able to change. In this case, an exercise that I sometimes do with patients, I actually ask them to go and write down what are the thoughts that's coming up for them, like we did a little bit earlier, the thoughts and emotions, what's coming up for them, and to ask themselves a question, which one of these things can they change and which one of these things they need to accept? Because in the gap between what I need to accept and what I can change, that's the space where people often find their anxiety, because they sometimes try and change things they need to accept, and vice versa. So why accept reality? Because rejecting reality does not change reality. Changing reality requires first accepting it. And I'll unpack that a little bit later. Rejecting reality turns pain into suffering. And pain can't be avoided. It's nature's way of signaling that something is wrong. But here's the dialectic for us. It's what we got. This situation is what we got. We didn't ask for this. I think 2 or 3 months ago, someone would probably have said that this is impossible. It can't happen. But it has happened. It's what we got. It's not what we wanted. But not wanting it is not making it go away. So us not wanting it is not actually changing the fact that it is happening. So radical acceptance is when you can't keep painful events from coming. It's accepting the things you cannot change with your mind, heart, and body. It's letting go of your attachment to the outcome. The difference between acceptance and radical acceptance then being, acceptance is I can look at the facts and I can say, well, okay, I'm accepting this. Radical acceptance means you're throwing yourself into it completely. And I'm actually going to play a video clip a little bit later by Marsha Linehan, which is kind of the author of dialectical behavior therapy, and how she actually explains radical acceptance. And so the question is, what has to be accepted? What has to be accepted is reality as it is, about the past and the present. The idea is not to take our crystal ball out and predict the future. The idea is not for us to say, I'm accepting my future fate as if it's already happened. The idea is to accept the past and the present for what it is, not for what we want it to be. And what has to be accepted? Limitations on the future. The idea is that we actually can say there are certain things we can no longer do based on this reality. And the idea is to say that there's no catastrophizing. especially when working with patients and clients who are so stressed and dysregulated. The idea is that we can actually help them see that whatever events happen in the future, if you can find a way of accepting what's happening right now, you can actually find a way of accessing resources for the future. And what has to be accepted is life can be worth living even in the midst of pain. So radical acceptance is not approval, it's not passive, and it's not against change. What I don't want you to hear today is that radical acceptance just means I'm okay with everything. Radical acceptance does not mean I say, well, everything's just fine. It's not a denial. It's an acceptance. It's engaging with your heart, mind, body. It's engaging with all of your being in a way that I can actually say I can access resources because I've moved beyond the space where I'm still fighting it. So radical acceptance is not approval, passive, or against change. Now, in describing this idea of protesting, I thought about two examples. The first one, and what we're saying is the opposite of acceptance is protesting, which is a very normal human response, by the way, and I'll discuss that a little bit later. But the two examples I've got here is the first one is I've got a little Yorkshire Terrier. This Yorkshire Terrier is called Tiger. Okay, so I know he's got an ironic name. He weighs 1.9 kilograms. He's very small. But since he was a little puppy, he's always thought that he can beat up the thunder. Okay, so he's always, whenever there's thunder around, he becomes agitated. So he would run outside and he would be barking at the thunder, and this little Yorkie is convinced that his barking is making such an impact on the thunder that he's actually able to make it stop, which we obviously know is not. So he's protesting the reality. He's got a certain emotion, he's got a certain amount of anger and frustration, and I don't know what else. But the point is, he's protesting what's happening outside of him, but it's having absolutely no impact. The second example I want to give, and that's from a patient. Now, I did ask the person's permission. I asked their permission a few years ago because I've shared this in a few of my workshops. But it's a patient that came to see me and they had dwarfism. Now, what they came with was the fact that they were tired of everybody calling them small. They were tired of everybody calling them all sorts of names. That's the first thing. The second thing they came with was the fact that the person had a girlfriend that was normal length and normal height. And so he was really tired of people staring at them in shopping malls. So he was saying, he came to therapy and he was saying, I'm so tired of everybody calling me small. I'm so tired of everybody calling me names. And I'm tired of going to a mall and everybody staring at my girlfriend and I. So for him, the process was towards acceptance because his anger, anxiety, and depression was not making him any taller. So the reality for him is that he needed to move towards radical acceptance. And that didn't just mean conditional being okay with it. It meant with his whole body and his whole mind and his whole soul, he needed to accept the fact that he was a certain height and that when walking in the malls, I asked him the question, I said, if you are walking in a mall and you see someone, their height differs significantly, is it something you will look at? And his answer was yes. I said, are you in fact shorter than the average person? And his answer was yes. And I said, so the problem is not so much you being a certain height as it is you not accepting that you are. And what protesting looks like, it's shaking your fists at the sky, but it doesn't change the situation, nor does it make you feel any better. On the contrary, repetitive protest thoughts distract you from gaining greater self-awareness, thinking of ways to solve problems, and taking action. Disbelief, denial, and bargaining are all normative automatic reactions to discomfort, fear, and trauma. We engage in such thinking both in response to the internal world of our own feelings, as well as external events such as COVID-19. So some examples of internal protesting is this paradoxical dance we spoke about last week. It's I will not feel sad when you are in fact feeling sad. And us as healthcare professionals can protest this, in its internal protest, by saying this is not fair. Why do I need to go to hospital? Why do I need to be the one seeing patients? Why is this happening? An internal protest, if you have to stay at home, could be something like, this is not fair. Why is it happening? But the more time we spend trying to fight reality, the more defeated, overwhelmed, and helpless we feel, because denial simply cannot change reality. Just like my Yorkshire Terrier, if he goes outside, he barks at the thunder. He's not making any impression on the thunder. The symptoms or the emotions we had a little bit earlier, and the thoughts we had about those figures, and the thoughts we had about the lockdown being prolonged, is not necessarily making the figures go down or making the lockdown any shorter. Which means we are in a position where we're saying, if we don't find a way of accepting this, we will be protesting this for the next 3 weeks, and we will actually be delaying the ability to accept and find a way to actually mobilize resources. External process looks something like, this disease cannot be as contagious or lethal as they're saying it is. It's almost a denialism. Or this has got to end before I have to cancel my plans. So I think most of us at some stage or another have had a discomfort with regards to plans being changed or plans being postponed. And I think so this is a way of external protesting. Okay. So I'd like to use an exercise. So as you guys are sitting, I'd like you to, I'm just going to move this over here. It's a willingness exercise. And I'd like you to find a comfortable space, both feet on the ground. Your hands communicate to your brain, and your brain connects to your body. So the idea is that in using an acceptance skill, we're able to actually say our body can mimic something which our mind cannot comprehend yet. So the part one, I'd like you to sit down, place both feet on the ground, and your hands on your lap with palms facing upwards and your fingers relaxed. I'd like you to go to the thoughts and the emotions you had a little bit earlier. And maybe while I was talking, you had certain, maybe some things came up that you might need to let go of in this moment. Maybe there were certain thoughts, or maybe you've realized there's been protesting which has prevented you from accepting. So I'd like you to take 30 seconds and ask yourself the question with your palms facing upwards. What do I need to let go of? What have I been protesting that I need to accept? I'm going to give you guys about 30 seconds for that. And if you want to, you can share in the chat column. But you're also welcome in the Q&A section while I'm talking to also ask questions. Okay, thank you very much, everybody that's sharing. I invite you actually to continue this exercise, even during this week, because I think, I said it last week and I'll say it again, I think our president is being very proactive. And I think we are in a preparation phase. And the hope is that we won't go over into an active phase where things actually start spiraling out of control. But I think regardless of what happens to the people around us as healthcare professionals, if we can use this exercise to actually move from protesting to accepting quicker, I think we can mobilize resources in ourselves and in the people around us a lot quicker. Okay. Now, something I shared last week, which I'd just like to touch on again, because I actually want to get to the Q&A section today, because I think what I'm seeing is there are really a lot of really good questions coming through. Something I shared last week, but I'd just like to touch on it again. So I shared the idea of last week of the zone that we are in, and that the space in the middle here, I call that the regulation zone. That is where we still feel regulated. And within this space right here is normal human emotion, where people have a normal up, and the upward in this case would be emotions that carry energy. And this could be in the form of anger. It could be in the form of anxiety. It could be in a variety of different forms that we actually see people carrying this emotion. And us as healthcare professionals, that we are now faced with a situation where we are prompted, and our response is actually also going upwards, because we are also human. And so the idea is that we find ways to say, well, how can we flatten this curve for ourselves? If there's an emotional response, there's something happening in our environments, how do we actually flatten this curve for ourselves? I have found that people with a lack of acceptance take longer to do this. So individuals with a lack of acceptance, I'm just going to draw this for you. Individuals with a lack of acceptance, or still protesting a reality which they cannot change. Remember this dialectic between change and acceptance. Individuals who cannot find a way of accepting and mobilizing resources actually oscillate like this, instead of finding a way where they find a new equilibrium, where they can go down low enough that they can actually say, I can function in a more useful way. Especially with our clients, I think if we've got that ability to ground ourselves using acceptance-based skills, more specifically radical acceptance, I think that'll be great for us, and it will also be great for the people around us. So the other concept I'd like to share with is responding willfully or willingly. So willfulness is refusing to tolerate the moment, refusing to make changes that are needed, giving up the opposite of doing what works, trying to fix every situation, insisting on being in control, and his attachment to me, and what I want right now. So responding in a willful or willing manner. Willfulness is ego. Willfulness is I'm holding on, I'm refusing, I'm protesting. And a willing response, the opposite of that then would be willingness is doing just what is needed in each situation wholeheartedly without dragging your feet. Willingness is listening very carefully to wise mind and then acting from your wise mind. Willingness is acting with awareness that you are connected to the universe. Okay, so I'd like to play you guys a video clip by Marshall Linnan, and then I'm going to jump over to the panel, and then I'm going to give you an exercise I'd like you to do during the course of this week. Just want to get my camera sorted. Okay.
I've been transformed by the very therapy that I developed. Because once I realized that I had to teach the clients acceptance, I realized at that very same moment in my own personal life, I had somehow lost my ability to accept, and that I was going to have to learn it myself. And so I ended up taking a sabbatical point or time off from my job. What I found out when I went to the first Buddhist monastery was within days, I knew that I had found exactly what my clients needed. I had no doubts about it. I figured that out right away. That acceptance was exactly what they needed, but that they had a way of teaching it that I could translate. My problem was I tried to take it stock and barrel to my client. At Shasta Abbey, the basic message was all the time to try to radically accept everything and to let go of desires and what you want. So we got jobs every single morning. And so it was the idea of practicing letting go of wanting a particular job. If you were sweeping, they would tell you when the bell rang for work to stop, they would tell you stop in the middle because finishing is just your own thing. You're trying to do something you want to do, just let go. So it was this whole practice of just constantly, moment by moment, letting go of what you want and radically accepting what is. It was the first environment I'd ever been in. It was completely non-sexist. I thought I'd died and gone to heaven. I'm not kidding. It was so unbelievable. Men and women would get the same jobs. There was no real distinction. I mean, admittedly, it may not have been helpful if I hadn't just completely thrown myself into it. But since I decided ahead of time that I had to learn this, my only option was just to do everything I was told, just throw myself in. And I was a student, so there were 8 of us. We did everything together. It was really the practice of letting go of having to have what you wanted at any moment. And the recognition that you didn't have to always have whatever it was you wanted. That had a big effect in some ways on the therapy, that in the sense that I try to teach clients, suppressing what you want is not the way to go. You have to radically accept that you want something you don't have, and it's not a catastrophe. And so I stayed there for 2 months. Then I went to Germany to the Catholic priest. It was actually the first time in my life I ever talked to someone who actually understood me, the spiritual part of me. Given that my spiritual part of myself is the core of myself, more central than anything else about me, having that understood was an amazing experience. It had a transformative effect on me. What it did is it gave me a home. I am now convinced that it was the practice of radical acceptance every moment that will transform you. I don't have the slightest doubt. It would transform everyone. But it has to be a regular practice. And radical acceptance doesn't mean you don't try to change things, because you only have to radically accept the moment that you're in and the past. But you can try to change the next moment. You can't change anything if you don't accept it, because if you don't accept it, you'll try to change something else that you think is reality. So radical acceptance is simply the radical acceptance that reality is what it is. And if you want to change it, then you work on changing it, which is perfectly legitimate also. But I think it's hard to change something if you don't accept it in the first place.
Okay. Guys, so what I'm going to do now is we're going to do one more exercise, and while we're doing that exercise, I'd like to throw open a Q&A, because like I said, we've got about 23 minutes left. And we've got, I'm sure, look, I'll be completely honest. I think this part of DBT is probably the hardest session I go into. I mean, we've got a 24-week program. And this is the hardest week, because you've got people that walk in with trauma, you've got people that walk in with things that have happened, which they've got difficulty accepting. And I think right now we're in the midst of that. And this is probably the hardest session I have in those 24 weeks. So I'd like to throw open the Q&A section. If you've got any questions, like I said, you can ask them anonymously. We've got a panel that is willing to answer. And as we are kind of throwing open the questions, there's one more exercise that I'd like to just do with you guys. And it's an exercise that I want you to actually do, that dreaded word as homework as well. It's an exercise you can actually sit down and as you did a little bit earlier, sitting down with your palms facing upwards, both feet on the ground, just to observe. Remember, we did observe describe participate. And I said right at the beginning, mindfulness is the core of all DBT. The first one is to observe some of the internal and external protests you have about the current situation. Okay. Look for anger, bitterness, annoyance, avoiding emotions, saying, why me? Why is this happening? I can't stand this. It shouldn't be this way. So looking at that in a non-judgmental way. The second step would be to say, go within yourself and make an inner commitment to accept reality as it is. A little bit earlier, I asked you to open your hands, and I asked you to let go of some of the things that you're holding on to, some of these internal and external protests, because these protests are not changing the situation. Do it again over and over. Keep turning your mind to acceptance each time you come to the fork in the road where you can reject reality or accept it. You can protest or you can accept. And so this exercise, turning the mind, is about, I'm actually saying, I can accept this or I can reject this. I can accept or I can protest. And every time there's a protest, having the discipline to then say, I'm accepting. And then lastly, it's to develop a plan for catching yourself in the future when you drift out of acceptance. Okay. I did forward last week's slides as well, so I'm going to be forwarding this as well. So it's an observe, make an inner commitment, do it again, and develop a plan. Okay. Right.